Baltimore and W after a day off. They will continue in Toronto, and Luke Jones and I will continue to chronicle. But, so far so good. That was as normal a baseball game as we've seen around here in a month by baseball game standards for you and I who've watched decent pitching here at least along the last 30, 40 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, we saw Dylan Bundy pitch well over the weekend, but Kevin Gausman, who didn't go deep into the game, but pitched well. 5 1/3 shutout innings, and one of the things that really struck me was Buck Showalter took advantage of the off day. He was able to deploy his bullpen earlier than we've seen in quite some time. And one, that's a product of getting Darren O'Day back as well, but it really made you remember and realize how little the Orioles have been able to use that long of a bullpen chain because of the Zach Britton injury. So really good pitching. As you alluded to, one strike away from a shutout when Brad Brock gives up the home run to Tulowitzki in the 9th inning. But a really nice, clean, crisp effort from the Orioles on Tuesday night. And, don't look now, but they've won 3 straight, and they're actually playing a little bit better than anyone else in the division right now. So,
yeah, the Yankees and the Red Sox, I mean, as much as it felt like they were pulling away, they've just sort of stalled, right?
Especially the Yankees have lost 11 of 14. I mean, they're missing Aaron Hicks now. They just put Starlin Castro on the DL. I mean, that's a team that, for all the offense, they've had their issues on the back end of the bullpen. So, you kind of look at this entire division, and no one is really. I mean, it looked like the Yankees a month ago. That they looked like the team that had the chance to pull away, and then the Red Sox surged a bit. And it's not as though Boston's playing awful. They've won a couple in a row here, but they've had their issues as well, and certainly they've had their health problems. But you look at this division, and the Orioles, who have been left for dead by everyone, including you and I a couple different times, it seems like, over the last 5-6 weeks with the way they played. And who could blame anyone for feeling that way? They're 4.5 games out now. It's just you wouldn't have expected that as much, but it does speak to whatever you want to call it. And I'm not sure it's mediocrity in this division, but I think there's 4 teams that all have some strengths. And Toronto had been playing a little bit better of late, but they've plateaued over the last few weeks. Some teams that have beaten up on each other a little bit, and no one to this point ready to seemingly take off. I mean, certainly I still look at Boston and the Yankees as the favorites. I mean, I think it's hard not to, but you keep looking at the standings, and teams like Tampa Bay and even the Orioles finding a way to hang around despite their obvious deficiencies.
Yeah, but on a night-by-night basis, you always ask who's going to pitch. They all have better pitching potential, but then Gausman comes up and you're like, well, maybe he will figure it out. Maybe this is what happens to young pitchers. Maybe the second half will look a whole lot like last year did for him, and he'll work it out. And I guess on Tuesday night, it's the first time in a long time we've seen Kevin Gausman sort of survive 5 innings, and certainly 5 shutout innings. And, he had his struggles. I mean, the whole staff did. I mean, there was a little Houdini act going on there. There were some bases loaded. And quite frankly, the Blue Jays, who may be as free-swinging as the Orioles overall, they swung at a pitch over his head with the bases loaded in 2 strikes. So, they were let off the hook a little bit during the game, but they never had a large enough lead to feel comfortable, not even in the 9th inning.
Right. I mean, it was, like I said, not a perfect win, but overall very crisp compared to what we've seen. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think 4 days after tying the Major League record for allowing 5 or more runs in 20 straight games, they came within a strike of pitching a shutout. It kind of just reminds you that baseball is pretty funny.
Baseball's kind of weird. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And, and when you look at the bullpen, Givens, O'Day, Brock, that's really... That was the spring training bullpen, right? I mean, other than Britton, who would have probably come into a 3-0 game at the end there. But, for Buck to get the bullpen set up and have 3 legitimate major league relievers, and we're all assuming and hoping that O'Day is really healthy and that was not rushed back. I mean, that time will tell on that. But, this is the real Oriole team. And that definitely gives a boost to things that don't exist when you're reaching for some guy my wife's never heard of to come out of the bullpen in the 6th inning.
Right. I mean, they've gotten some decent contributions from Richard Blyer, and Asher's had his moments. But you're right. I mean, this is what it was intended to do, this bullpen, and it kind of reminds you that if the starting pitching is at least competitive, and I mean, you can, Gausman, going 5 1/3 innings. Yeah, you'd like to see him pitch deeper into the game. And a couple weeks ago, we probably would have seen Buck Showalter leave him out there because he wouldn't have had Darren O'Day at his disposal, or Michael Gibbons and Brad Brock would have been a little more overworked. And like I said, the off day really helped. But it does remind you of what this team was kind of designed to do, and we knew they wouldn't have good starting pitching. Now, we didn't know it was going to be necessarily this horrendous, specifically over what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, just getting DEFCON 5 territory. But if they get representative efforts, if they get acceptable outings, they've got a chance to win games. And the big question is, can they continue that? What I like seeing from Kevin Gausman is this was him building on what he did his last outing. I thought his stuff was better in his last start against Cleveland, which I wrote about it. We discussed it at length. Was interesting to see. According to StatCast, he did not throw a single slider. So we're seeing Kevin Gausman in some ways go back to his roots, which was fastball, split changeup, which we always said, okay, he needs a breaking pitch, I agreed with that all along, but it has to be a breaking pitch that's good. It has to be something that you feel good about, and it's not impacting your overall repertoire, and I think we saw that impacting him earlier this year. Was using the slider a lot more, wasn't really using the split, which has always been his best secondary pitch, and his last couple outings, we've seen him kind of revert to the Kevin Gausman that he was his first few seasons, which, look, I'm not saying that guy's an ace, but he's certainly way better than the Gausman we've seen over the first 2.5 months of the season. So I was encouraged to see him build on that. Now he needs to continue that. It can't just be 2 decent outings and then you're giving up 5 or 6 runs your next time out, but it's encouraging to see him kind of stack respectable performances together back to back, and it just the thing that I really liked beyond just using that split change a little more and less of the slider was able to command the fastball down in the zone. I think one of the best pitches of the night that he threw was in that 4th inning. Some loud contact earlier in that inning, and he was able to get Donaldson on a 3-2 fastball that he just dotted at the very bottom of the strike zone after Donaldson had hit one. Basically hit a home run that was about 6 feet foul earlier in the at-bat. It was good to see him bounce back and be able to make that kind of a pitch on a 3-2 count.
Yeah, Donaldson didn't like it much.
Yeah, he didn't like it. Well, Angel Hernandez was behind the plate, I believe. So, yeah, there was some of that on both sides. But overall, though, had to like what you see from Gausman. Givens, as wild as he was in the 6th inning, which was about as wild as we've seen Michael Givens, found a way to make it work, and then he settled in and pitched really well in the 7th. And you talked about O'Day. Good to see him come back. His 3 appearances since returning from the DL last week, he's been crisp. He's missed bats. You just cross your fingers that the shoulder holds up. That's not something that I'm necessarily counting on, but you hope that tends to be the case because they're right around the corner from getting Zach Britton back at this point. Rehab stint has gone well. He's got a few more, and then they expect to activate him on the 5th. So they're just about at the point of getting this bullpen back to full strength the way it was designed to be. Now it's just a case of keep everyone else healthy in the meantime, of course, but can you get that starting pitching a little bit better? What they got from Gausman on Tuesday, they can live with outings like that. You'd like a little more length, but that's at least putting you in a position to have a chance to win. These outings where they've had starters getting knocked out in the 3rd inning and giving up 6 runs and you're already out of it, that's what's absolutely killed them here over the last 4 or 5 weeks.
He is Luke Jones. He is a Baltimore Luke on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. Don't look now, but you and I have flights to Miami. And, much like, I guess, Billy Joel sang about Miami and Will Smith sang about Miami, we're trying to figure out which Oriole will be singing about Miami in a couple of weeks. And I know we have all the vote oranges going on. And as one of my Canadian friends said earlier this week, Canadians love to vote for the All-Star game. So Justin Smoke, obviously, we're taking a look at him. But Jonathan Scope's got to go to the All-Star game, right? And I don't know about how the rest of the voting would go and, obviously picking players for the roster and stuff. But Scope has been the guy that has stepped up. And I know you've written a blog out at WNST.net about some standout guys and some opportunities. I don't think we're going to see Trey Mancini there this year. But that being said, this is the time of the year, the next 2 weeks, we'll be talking about such things.
Yeah, and if you had asked me a few weeks ago if Scope would make the All-Star game, I would have pointed to all of it's just the second base is such a deep position in the American League. I mean, you have Altuve, who's an MVP candidate. You have some of the blue bloods, the guys who've been around forever, like Robinson Cano and Dustin Pedroia, and Starlin Castro has had a good season, although he was just placed on the DL. But with Castro going to the DL, and you just look at the statistics, you look at the numbers, there's only one guy that's been better than Jonathan Scope at second base. It's Jose Altuve. You can make arguments for other guys being as good as Scope, but, he's just been terrific. He entered Tuesday ranked 4th in the AL in doubles, leads the Orioles in hits, homers, RBIs, total bases. He's just been terrific. He was the one who started both scoring rallies on Tuesday night. As much as you look at some of those other guys, I think you have to look at Scope and the fact that the Orioles need to have a representative, and I get it. It's not exactly a long list of deserving candidates for the Orioles this year, but this also isn't Ty Wigginton being a de facto representative for them 7 years ago. Scope is absolutely deserving. It's going to be a shame if he doesn't make it, and I think the way he's performed over the last couple weeks, and then couple that with the Castro injury and some other second basemen who just haven't been quite as good as him, it puts him in much better position to make it. Mancini would be more intriguing, but one, it's tough for rookies to get that kind of attention, to get that kind of acclaim. Certainly Aaron Judge is grabbing all the headlines as far as American League rookies this year. Otherwise, we'd be talking about Trey Mancini possibly being a Rookie of the Year candidate, but we're not, because Aaron Judge is maybe not human the way he's able to perform. But Mancini also bouncing between first base, left field, right field, DH. When you don't have a defined position, that typically hurts you unless Francona decides not to take Scope, and they're kind of looking at this roster selection process, and you say, well, maybe he's a little bit of a wild card for him. I wouldn't be stunned to see that, although I'd be pretty surprised because I think at this point Scope has made a good case. But if it's not one of those two, I think you look historically, Ness, as far as so-so teams that don't have a well-distinguished candidate, they'll take the closer. Brad Brock overall has been really solid other than a 2.5-week period in late April to early May. But his numbers, he's 14 of 17 in save opportunities. That's nothing special, but if they need to take someone and they don't take Scope for whatever reason, or Mancini, I wouldn't be stunned to see Brock. But beyond that, a month ago, Dylan Bundy had a great chance. Now, I'd say not so much. And the Orioles, the fact that they're trying to back off of him a little bit, I would say leaves his chances very, very slim. When a month ago, he probably would have been my pick as the Orioles All-Star representative. And the one guy that I'll throw in there, and this is where we go into the debate, and I wrote a little bit about this in my blog at WNST.net. You always talk about this case study of what the All-Star Game is truly about. Is it a showcase for the game's brightest stars, or is it a reward for having 3 good months?
Well, it's a money-making endeavor. Let's start with that.
Right.
Because, there's no real reason to play it, right?
It is. So when you think about it in that context, and look, I'm not saying Manny Machado deserves to be in the All-Star Game, but he's a Miami native. He's still regarded as one of the great stars in the game. And let's not dismiss the defense. He's played defense better than anyone at third base in the American League. And the numbers, all the sabermetrics support that. I wouldn't be completely shocked if you see him included somehow. And maybe it's just maybe he's invited to participate in the home run derby. That might be kind of the middle ground way of doing it. I don't think he's deserving of it, but at the same time, if this game is about showcasing your stars and you're talking about a hometown guy, I wouldn't be completely stunned. I'm not saying it's a high probability. I'm not saying he's deserving. I'd much rather see Jonathan Scope go over Manny Machado. But as you pointed out, the money-making endeavor, and there are lots of people. I know Keith Law has talked about this, for example, from ESPN, how he wants to see the All-Star Game showcase its stars, not just solely be about guys who have 3 good months, or in this case, someone being punished for having 3 not so good months. So that's just, to me, that's the wild card to keep in the absolute back of your mind. But I think Jonathan Scope's done such a fantastic job this year. It's been fun to watch him grow. As much as these last 6 weeks of Orioles baseball hasn't been all very enjoyable, to state the obvious, it's been really fun watching his progression at the plate and kind of see him blossom into an absolute force. So I'm hoping he's the one, but there's still an outside chance, at least for some of those other guys I mentioned.
Look, we're going to talk about this 2 weeks from now. And by the way, Luke and I will be in Miami. They're going to let him in. I'm up for grabs. I mean, you may meet me down at Versailles for a Cuban sandwich and maybe some beans and rice. But this will be as interesting an All-Star game, I think. And you have never attended one. I've been going on and off for 25 years now. But, in all those All-Star games, I can look back on the pictures of me on the field and who was there and the players that were all well-established players. We're in this era now over the last year or 2 or 3 where the Derek Jeters aren't there anymore, the Mariano Riveras aren't. I mean, the Cal Ripkens are long gone. A lot of those guys are long. The Barry Bondses, they're all long gone now. And there is this whole new group of all of these Lindors and Arenados and Trouts and Harpers and all of that stuff. And I hear you on Machado. 220 won't get you there. Maybe the votes will get you there. But in this particular All-Star game, I think when you look back 10 years from now, there are going to be a lot of guys headed to the Hall of Very Good because the sheer volume of players, not even under 30, but like under 27,
right,
is astonishing. I mean, it's a whole new era of player where there aren't a whole lot of old fart hold-ons at 35 or 36 that you want to bring in a rocking chair and doff your cap one last time to. There's not a lot of that going on in baseball in this era right now.
Yeah, and that's, as much as we can talk about baseball's issues, pace of play, the fact that home runs and strikeouts have just taken over the game, and in a lot of ways has kind of hurt it from a lack of action.
Dude, it's harder to watch. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I said my wife used to love watching baseball. Now she's like, well, dude, nothing's going on. And they stink, and they can't throw a strike. And they throw ball 3-2 pitches over a guy's head, and they're swinging. And, I mean, it's just swing, right? I mean, that's the sport right now.
Well, and I mean, as much as people talk about length of game, I think a big factor that a lot of people miss is there's more velocity and more swings and misses than ever. The game is as difficult as it's ever been from that standpoint because you have all these flamethrowers throwing 95-plus in the bullpen, multiple guys. It used to just be a team had 1 or 2 guys like that. Now teams have 4 or 5
and
guys.
Pitchers
like
can
that.
Also throw at your head and not get thrown out. We found that out.
And there's that whole issue as well. And, my thoughts on that, we've talked about it a lot. We'll continue to talk about that the next time there's a knucklehead kind of incident. But all of those issues aside, and when you talk about retirements of guys like Derek Jeter and David Ortiz here in recent years, and you kind of ask, okay, well, what's next for the game? You do look at the number of not just good players, but absolute rock star players under the age of 25. And it gives you hope that, they'll make some adjustments. I've heard numerous people within the game say the pitch clock's coming next year. Some other changes are coming next year. And the game will look a little different. But in terms of the star power, which, we've seen Machado and Scope here in Baltimore. We've seen guys elsewhere, the Correas, the Lindors. I mean, Mike Trout kind of started it all. Bryce Harper. I mean, it's just you have just an absolute lengthy list of star players, and when you see that, and that gives you hope for the future of the game. Now, baseball needs to market these guys correctly, and it's tricky because it's not like the NBA because baseball is a very regional game, whereas the NBA is all about their stars. So there's a little bit different sweet spot there to hit, but when you have so many great young players in this game, it just, that's what gives me hope as a baseball fan who wants to see the game can thrive in the future. That's something that you do look to, and that does give you some hope because, you aren't just necessarily gravitating to having a celebration for a Cal Ripken or a Derek Jeter or a David Ortiz. It's really, now you kind of look at the game, it's a showcase of all these guys that are 25, 26 and younger, and there are more coming. And that's just it really speaks to the shift in the game where, and it's quietly kind of always been the case. Younger players are always going to bring more value because they'll typically be much better defensively than guys that are approaching their late 20s and getting into their 30s. But now we're seeing teams exploit that more. And it goes back to what we were talking about a couple days ago. We were talking about Trey Mancini, a guy who mastered every level of the minor leagues. You don't see that a whole lot anymore. You see guys that skip, triple A or spend minimal time in double A, or guys that are drafted out of college and only spend a year in the minors, or high school players that are up by age 20. There's just a lot more of that because teams realize that these younger players, they have certain skills that as they get older diminish, and they take advantage of these guys, their prime years when they're cheap and under club control. So you have all those factors kind of working together, but what it's resulted in is an absolute young man's game. And this is an era where next week's All-Star game, 2 weeks from now, the All-Star game, we might be seeing a number of future Hall of Famers playing that are still wet behind the ears,
that might play in 10 All-Star games, right? Literally.
Yeah. And guys that will be in Cooperstown one day potentially if they stay healthy. So it's just from that standpoint, as much as we like to talk about baseball's issues, that's one aspect of the game that really has me excited for the future.
I want to give you one stat that jumped out at me today, and it's very random and weird, and we'll see the Houston Astros again before it's all over with. Dude, they are 29-9 on the road. Like, when we start talking about good baseball teams, and I remember the 98 Yankees team, and obviously the Seattle team that, won 115, 116 games, whatever it was. This Houston team right now playing almost 700 ball, I don't remember ever looking at a team that won 3/4 of its games on the road at any point in any season. The Golden State Warriors maybe, right? Literally 3/4 of the games they played on the road. They played 40 games on the road, and they've won 29 of them. It's unbelievable.
Makes you happy not to be in the NL or the AL West, right? You have Texas and the Angels, and these are teams that haven't played great, but they've managed to hang around 500. The Angels, having done it without Mike Trout for a few weeks now, they're 12.5 games out. It's incredible. Even more incredible, I think, than Houston, though. Look at the Twins. They're 23-11 on the road, which is fantastic. They're 9 games below 500 at Target Field.
Yeah, and 4 of those came to their direct competitor when Cleveland went in there and broke out the brooms on them.
So and as much as we have those general facts that we say, play well at home, hold your own on the road, and that's something the Orioles have played quite well at home. They haven't played well on the road, and that's a big reason why they've fallen to the 500
Come on, man. In the history of my life, and you have to look this up, and I'll go find the Houston beat writers at some point, show me a baseball team that has ever, at any stretch, gone 29-9 on the road. Ever.
Not many.
I can't think of – I'm thinking of the best teams of my lifetime, and saying some of these teams that really have had – maybe the Detroit Tigers in '84. I don't know, but they were 35-5 at one point, during that season.
Right.
And I remember that vividly because they came in here and kicked our ass in June of '84 and broke my dad's heart. But I looked down at that recently, and I'm like, how can that be right? I've just never – Billick and I talk all the time about, the toughest thing in sports to do, no matter what it is win on the road. Nobody seems to really know why, but that's just the way it works in every sport, across the board, across 100 years. To be playing 750 ball for this kind of stretch of time on the road is really unprecedented in my mind. I know Elias and sports stats and MLB stats. Research that one for me, Luke, because that might be an all-timer, man.
Well, I just looked at it, and it's close. It's not far away. The Mariners in 2001, remember, they won 116 games, 59-22 on the road, which is not far off that pace.
Houston would have to go 30-13 on the road to match that.
Yeah,
just to match it.
Yeah, that's the thing. And Houston's on an unbelievable pace, but they'd have to continue a pace that's almost that good to do that.
And you know what's weird about them is they had the ultimate home field advantage on the carpet with the noise and all that stuff. You would have thought, well, they did that at home. I mean, I've never in my life.
Weren't they in Safeco by 2000? I think
they were in Safeco by 01. They had the All-Star game right around that time.
Yeah, because Ripken hit the home run.
That's correct. So they had moved.
Yeah.
Because of all the places I've ever seen a baseball game, and I don't know if I've ever admitted this on the air or not. I probably have at some point. But I remember the day that the Orioles played the Randy Johnson game where, they had Rebele in the lineup and Palmeiro took the day off and all that stuff. I went out for that playoff game. I guess that was 97, right?
That was 97,
It was 97.
Game 1.
I flew out there for games 1 and 2. I was only in Seattle 36 hours total. And I remember being down in the dugout. And I have some pictures with Brady Anderson and Jesse Orozco, and maybe Rick Down was around at that point, but Davey Johnson was obviously the last legs for him. And I'll never forget being in the dugout, and Elrod Hendricks said to me, "Wait till you see this place tonight." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I've been playing the game my whole life. This is the loudest." He said, "It feels like you're on a runway."
Yeah.
And it really was the loudest building. I mean, it got so loud that the concrete was falling in from the ceiling on Sid Fernandez, at that point. But that building was so much of a home field advantage, and they did that at Safeco. So there you go.
Yeah, it does speak to how incredibly difficult it is. I mean, even teams that win 95, 100 games, you typically will look at their road record, and it's solid, it's good. But it's not anything where you're just shaking your head. It's typically most teams clean up at home and play 8, 9 games over 500 on the road, and that's usually a formula that'll get you to the postseason.
Well, our NFL formula is easy, right? Go 7-1 at home and 4-4 on the road, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're in the playoffs.
The Ravens, when they were playing at their best under John Harbaugh, that's typically what they would do. Just so on the road, but good enough, and play lights out in your home stadium. So certainly the Astros have played very well anywhere they've been, but pretty crazy to see them do what they've done on the road.
By the way, Zach Orr, just a little football piece since we transitioned into that, talking again about coming out of retirement. You and I have incredible affection for Zach Orr. I think we'd all be concerned about that, but I don't want to say, look, I mean, he's a young man who's this is what he's done, and there's a lot of money at stake. Certainly would have been a lot of money for him had this not occurred, and it would have been a great thing for the Ravens as well. Any thoughts on this at all?
Well, I mean, it's a non-starter if nothing's changed in terms of his prognosis. I mean, is there a procedure he had? Is there some new medical science that suggests that he's okay?
Well, there's a new round of medical evaluations, according to Mike Garofalo at the NFL.com.
I mean, if that's the case and that's legitimate, and we're not just talking about one specific doctor having this opinion and everyone else still feeling the same way they do, then great. But I mean, if that's if it is just one doctor, then you really worry about. I mean, this isn't. It's one thing to talk about an experimental knee injury or knee surgery, or if something came about that allowed Dennis Pitta's hip to be stable. The neck, when you're talking about the top of the spinal cord, that's life or death right there. That's not exaggerating saying that. That's the truth.
And that's for you and me if we got into a car accident, let alone him going out there and playing this game and making tackles the way he does.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to talk about, someone like Jalen Smith the Notre Dame kid who's with the Cowboys now and is going to try to play with the piece of the brace on his foot, to prevent drop foot because of the nerve damage he had. It's one thing to talk about that, where he might suffer a serious injury that might impact his quality of life from a walking or running standpoint. It's another thing to talk about the neck. So, if there is a medical breakthrough, if there is something that's been discovered that can change his overall prognosis as far as playing football and can keep him safe, then great. It was so sad to see his career end the way it did before it ever got started, before he ever made any real money. But if this is more a case of trying to find some loophole or exception and it's not going to be safe for him to play, then I hope I hope cooler heads prevail, wiser heads prevail here, and he doesn't put himself at risk. So we'll see how it plays out ultimately. And keep in mind, he's a free agent. So, interesting from that standpoint. More than anything, it's one thing to say that, his medical outlook is better. It's another thing to see if any team's going to clear him. And in this day and age of not specifically neck injuries, but all of the issues with concussions and the big lawsuit and all of that, and ongoing litigation and the ongoing dialogue as far as the safety of the game. Really wonder if there's a team or teams out there that would clear him to play.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. We'll be watching the Birds in Toronto. Luke is toweling off, getting ready for a weekend of very, very warm baseball here, as it will be into the 90s all weekend. And the Tampa Rays bring their Florida sunshine and warmth north to Camden Yards. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. That is all powered up by Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com. It's still $10 a month. It is bikini weather. It is bikini season. Get out to Planet Fitness and get yourself in great shape. Last but never least, breaking news will happen first on our WNST text service. The Norfolk Shuttle hopefully slowing down a little bit here as the Orioles get up on the All-Star break. But if there is news, you'll get it there first. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Don't forget the SSV on WNST. It is a Sunday Sports Voice. Dennis Colatzos is here from 3 until 5 each and every Thursday, driving you home, getting you ready for the red, white, the blue, the fireworks, the hot dogs, the hamburgers, hopefully the crabs, the pool, and maybe even a few ice-cold adult refreshments in the Heritage Fair. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.